Oh, okay. In this talk, I will briefly introduce the highlights of our accomplishments for the year of 2022 to 2023. Right. Okay. So first, I'd like to briefly put up our project scope and objectives. It's up there, and the key accomplishments that we had finished this year include the enhanced monitoring of injection-induced earthquakes in West Canada. We also developed a number of very innovative artificial intelligence-based methodology that we can use to automatically detect and locate the earthquakes. We use the AI approach to delineate the physical factors that controls the hydraulic fracture induced seismicity. And we publish a number of research papers, presumably on the source characteristics of significant induced events in Canada. We have been interviewed by a number of media organizations, including live programs at the CBC and local radio stations on significant induced events, as well as our induced seismicity research. And we are also invited by the American Rock Mechanics Association to give an international webinar, which was recorded and available at ARMA's YouTube channel. So on this slide, this is a list of our key members in this project that include the research scientists and supporting staff from 3 different GSC offices. We also have quite a number of research associates and volunteers that are supported externally by our research partners. I would like to point out one thing, though, is that many of our research associates and volunteers left during this year because they were recruited by other research organizations and the research universities with tenure-track full-time positions. So that's a good demonstration of our training of the highly qualified personnel. But nevertheless, it did have some impact to our human resources capacity, which we were able to try to compensate with additional casual employments and co-op students. Some of our collaboration highlights. First, we obtained external research resources as well, in addition to our A-base and C-base funding. Specifically, we have 90,000 funding from BC Oil and Gas Research Innovation Society to support our targeted research of induced events in northeast British Columbia. We also have the 185,000 contribution from BC Seismic Research Consortium, mainly to support the induced seismicity monitoring process in the West Canada Sedimentary Basin. We work with many universities as well as professional organizations to enhance the local and regional seismograph coverage in Western Canada. We also publish papers with our non-NRCan colleagues as co-authors. So I'd like to take this short presentation to show you some of our scientific highlights. Specifically, the first one that I like to introduce is a case study that we conduct for long-term wastewater disposal in Central West Alberta, as marked by this map. Here is the BC-Alberta border. That's our study area. Now, this area has been seismically quiet in the past, but fluid injection or wastewater injection in this study area started in about 2000. And the monthly injection rate at individual wells start to increase in 2018 to the level of about 100,000 cubic meter per month. And that's shown by these lines here. And the horizontal axis is time. So as we can see, by mid-2019, the regions start to show clusters of seismicities. And the y-axis here, as we for those dots, represent their magnitudes. And it is clear that some of the biggest one can reach the magnitude of almost 4. We have detected more than 140 events in this area since mid-2019. And one interesting observation is that when there is a sudden jump of injection rates, as marked by these gray bars, you can see that they are followed by clusters of induced events. And we determined the focal mechanisms of those relatively larger events here. Unlike many other sequences in Western Canada Sedimentary Basin that shows either strike-slip focal mechanism or thrust or reverse the focal mechanism, this particular earthquake sequence actually shows a variety of different focal mechanisms, including strike-slip events, thrust events, and normal events. We determined their rupture orientation as well as from the focal mechanism and compare with the regional stress regime in that area. Then we conclude that such a diverse seismic pattern is consistent with the development of what we call radial shear structures on reactivated crustal faults. Our interpretation is shown on the right-hand side on this schematic cartoon. After decades of wastewater injections, the fluids has probably reached the activate the crustal faults, and those crustal faults eventually generate seismic slip at the upper, shallower depths and deeper depths in the basement. But in the middle, where the total organic carbon content is high, such as the Duvernay formation, the slip actually perform in the aseismic way. So this study actually has important implications, not only for areas with long-term wastewater disposal, but also for areas chosen for long-term carbon sequestration in the future. The seismic risk from long-term injection cannot and should not be overlooked, even for area with no previous earthquake history. The second scientific highlights that I like to introduce is the development of innovative artificial intelligence-based automatic system to locate small magnitude induced earthquakes in a more efficient and accurate way. So this particular system has 3 steps. The first one is to convert the recorded seismograms to spectrogram here, and that will enrich the input to our AI system. The second step is to design a fully connected convolutional U-shaped neural network, and use this U-shaped convolutional neural network as the main tool to determine the arrival times of different seismic phases. Here is an example of the synthetic experiment that we put a source at a particular location with a number of stations. And this is the predicted arrival time of by the AI neural network for P waveforms shown by red and S waveforms shown by blue. So you can see that the predicted time corresponds to the arrival very well. The third step is to use the source scanning algorithm to obtain the final solution as shown in this map. In this particular case, the relative travel time between these different phases are used to construct this ring-shaped path. And the location where we have the highest number of intersection is determined to be the earthquake hypercenter. On the right-hand side, we compare the performance of our newly developed AI-based methods with the performance of human analysts and a very popular automatic system named SeisCom3, which is based on conventional approach. The horizontal axis is magnitude, earthquake magnitude. The vertical axis is the number of events. When you compare the performance of our AI-based system with human analysts, you can see that the number of detected events is very comparable at all magnitude range, but the amount of time and labor spent by human analysts will be much more, and therefore making our AI-based automatic system way more efficient. When you compare to the SeisCom3, which is another automatic system, the number of detected events is basically comparable if you look at the magnitude larger than 1.5. However, for smaller events, especially those smaller than magnitude 1.25, the number of events becomes much less comparing to our AI-based system. And this is very important for our study because most of the induced earthquakes are indeed small. And the third scientific highlights that I'd like to introduce is that we use AI-based approach to determine the physical factors that control the seismogenic process of induced events. Our results for the southern mountainy plate is shown on the left, and for the northern mountainy plate is shown on the right. For the southern mountainy plate, we found that the most influential factor is the injection type. And what we found is that more than 80% of the observed seismicity are associated with hydraulic fracturing, whereas wastewater disposal accounts for only up to 20% of the observed induced events. Now, given the same type of injection injection types, we found that the next influential factor is the location. For each of the hydraulic fracturing stage that are located inside the Fort St. John graben, we found that they can generate on average 0.66 events, which is much, much higher than those hydraulic fracturing operation in nearby regions. Then given the same location inside the Fort St. John graben, what we found is that the hydraulic fracturing stage targeting the lower middle mountainy formation has a much higher number of induced events comparing to those hydraulic fracturing stages targeting the upper mountainy formation or the upper middle mountainy formation. And the other ones appears to be much less seismogenic, even though they are sitting in the same Fort St. John graben structure. For the northern mountainy plate, we found that both natural and operational factors can be important. For example, the distance to the Canadian Cordillera Fault and Thrust and Fault Belt is the most important factor. And this is not surprising because this particular factor essentially determines the amount of tectonic deformation rate for that region, which provide the needed deformation for earthquake to happen. The second factor and the third one are the total volume and the shut-in pressure of the injection operation. So these are operational parameters. We also realize and conclude that the relative significance of these factors can vary from one region to another depending on their local geological and hydrological conditions. And therefore, more detailed targeted studies are needed to establish quantitative models to address the physical process linking the specific factors to the development of fault rupture of induced earthquakes. So this is my contact information. If you have any questions or would like me to elaborate in more detail, feel free to contact me. Thanks for your attention.